There's two kinds of sequels. There's the kind that does something new, elevating the source material and bringing the story to new heights. And then there's the kind that sticks its head up the ass of the original and just kind of wiggles around until they're both covered in shit. Or at least that was true in Dealt first episode. Spoiler warning, here it comes, 3, 2, 1. Final Fantasy VII Remake came out and changed, or depending on who you ask, ruined everything. Yeah, they pulled a Final Fantasy VII on us, those fuckers. Scott dies in the first episode. Okay, so, on one hand, I respect this a lot. I do, I really do. As Brian O'Malley himself says, if you want the original story, it's right there. It's not going anywhere. You can, and I have, read it again and again and again. But whether or not this sucks, I need to get this off my chest. The first episode, where it briefly at least pretends to be Scott Pilgrim, definitely sucks. It sucks. It's really bad. It's bad. Not as in like kind of disappointing. No, I mean it's like bad. Like where do I even start? The characters are just wrong. Listen to this.
Why aren't you bringing your new girlfriend to Julie's party? She's not really my girlfriend.
Yeah, Scott just goes and outright says that Knives isn't his real girlfriend and he's just stringing her along. I feel like this is so obvious I shouldn't even need to say what's wrong with it, but since this somehow went over everyone working on this, including literally the original writer himself, I guess here we are, dude. Scott dating a high schooler is unforgivable. He's 23, she's 17. That is not okay. It's very creepy, and this should put him on some kind of a list. The reason we forgive Scott, however, is because he's an idiot. He's put literally zero thought into this. He's never even touched her. He's just going with the flow. There wasn't even a point where he decided to date her. It just kind of happened by accident, and it didn't immediately blow up in his face, and so now that's just how it is. It's nice, he says. It's easy. It's simple. He doesn't have to think about it. He doesn't want to think about it. He doesn't want to think about anything, which is why he has such a hard time breaking up with her. It's not because he actually cares about her. It's because breaking up with her means admitting to himself that what he's doing is wrong and creepy. And that's Scott's whole thing. He's too immature to deal with any of his problems, so he runs away from them. All of them. And it's only by dating Ramona that he's forced to confront himself in all of his problems and learn to do better and be better. So when Scott says,
she's not really my girlfriend,
this just kind of throws all of this out the fucking window by telling us he's clearly at least put some thought into it. No, wrong, babe, go to jail. Real jail, not even weeb jail. There, I said it. Now, wait a minute, king of weeaboos, you say. It's different. Scott, fucking dies at the end of, the first goddamn episode. And yes, he does. But that's exactly what's so wrong about this. This is not them doing something different. This is them Final Fantasy VII-ing us. This is a bait and switch. A bait and switch only works with the bait. Bait is half of bait and switch. That's how that works. They needed to make this first episode absolutely motherfucking perfect, and however you feel about the rest of it, this episode sucks. It fucking sucks. It's not just this. They completely gutted Knives' character. She has like 2 lines in this episode. Half the reason this works is that we get to see Knives' innocence exploited right in front of us as we wait for Scott to grow the fuck up. Instead, we get every other character just sitting there and telling us that Knives is an angel. This doesn't work. Scott's relationship with her only works when we see how little thought he's put into this. Him instead personally telling us that he's an asshole is not that. When we get to the big moment where she and Ramona meet at the rocket, it loses all impact because we have no idea who the hell this girl is or why she matters. She's just kind of there. And besides the direct problems here, Scott is like way more confident. For one, almost every reference to envy is taken out, which removes all sense of pity he gets from every other character, and by extension, us. And then he's even the one that calls the date with Ramona a date. Not that he doesn't have moments of confidence, like when he gets Ramona into bed, but he only does this as a reaction to what other people are doing. Here, he takes charge and forces everyone onto stage when they're being pussies. I mean, this wouldn't really matter so much, but the problem here is that the only thing we're Final Fantasy VIIing is the first episode, which is just as much about his relationship with knives as it is Ramona. So you can't just make Scott more confident and aware. That doesn't work. And if I'm being honest, I don't love the other changes. Sonic the Hedgehog, look, I like Sonic as much as the next furry, but the same actor being in 2 different Sonic cartoons just doesn't have the same, I don't know, je ne sais quoi as the Pac-Man thing or the Mr. Silly thing. I mean, that doesn't really matter, but beyond that, it's just slow. The comic and the movie, they both have this intense energy just dripping from the story as it jumps from scene to scene, flowing like a high-energy punk rock song. This doesn't. It's quiet and slow, and honestly, on top of everything, it's a little bit boring. So, while I appreciate the rest of it doing something different, when it's trying to trick us into being Scott Pilgrim, it really needs to be Scott Pilgrim, and it falls flat on its face and pisses itself like it tried to drink away all of its problems, which is just sad because the first episode being bad completely sucks the wind out of, hold on, I'm still not sure whether or not the rest of it sucks yet, what is clearly an extremely high effort production. First off, the animation quality is top notch. Like, it was done by the studio that did Tatami Galaxy, my review of which was mostly just me fucking comparing it to Scott Pilgrim. So, to call this an ideal fit would be, as the kids say, an understatement. Next, this show is absolutely stacked with talent. Not only is literally every single cast member back, several of whom are orders of magnitude more famous than they were when they were making the original movie like 12 years ago, but goddamn Finn Wolfhard and weird motherfucking Al are in the credits? Why? Why would you do this? It's animated. I would have no idea this was them if you didn't tell me. I mean, their voice acting is superb, so like clearly the effort paid off, but Jesus. Next, the music rocks. This would be another completely unforgivable thing to fuck up, but no, the soundtrack rocks. I love it. Whoever was in charge of this knew what they were doing, not only in the original songs, but the actual songs they picked out perfectly capture the mid-2000s energy that is Scott Pilgrim. Oh, and they also got Metric back on board with this, and they fucking rock too. This is honestly the best part of the anime. Oh my god, it's so good. It's perfect, except for the part where Brie Larson, you know, Envy's actor, isn't singing, apparently because Emily Haynes is a bit of a narcissist, but whatever, she can go fuck herself, I guess. Oh, and not that anyone else besides me would actually notice, but the ending song is the original song that inspired this whole thing. You know, the one titled Scott Pilgrim, completely on a whim. That whim. Okay, so now that we've unpacked more baggage than your mom and your 4 stepdads, does Scott Pilgrim takes off rock or suck? What do you think, Jimmy? Trick question? Yeah, I don't know either. See, all the problems introduced by fucking up Scott's character kind of get solved when, you know, you kill him off as a character? Yeah, so, a weird slice of life whodunit starring Ramona Flowers? Conceptually, I don't hate this. Again, as I said, most sequels suck because they get high on the original supply and start a futile downward spiral of trying to recreate that first hit, failing again and again until they eventually end up sucking off dudes for a bump behind the closest Denny's, before either being put out of their misery in a final gesture of pity, or somehow sink even lower until they wither away and die in the dumpster, covered in their own filth, forgotten and alone. So, taking something we love and trying to do something completely original, no matter how good or bad, is basically always commendable because a bullet to the head is at least a more humane way to go out, no matter who pulled the trigger. So, what we get is what I can only describe as some mix between Saturday morning cartoon and late night Adult Swim, which is, I think, both everything right and completely wrong with Scott Pilgrim Takes Off at the exact same time. And to describe the problem here, I think we can divide this show into 2 parts, before and after it loses itself up its own asshole. The part before involves Matthew Patel, who was basically a complete throwaway villain, is now for some reason the main baddie who upstages Gideon, turning him into some whimpering simp as the story leans really hard into the League of Evil X's thing, as well as the Ramona Flowers detective agency, as she decides that Scott is still alive in a way that makes a questionable amount of sense, but whatever, fuck it. And this part I don't like. It spends like 2 full episodes with nothing of any real consequence happening while the story flounders around trying to decide what it's supposed to be, awkwardly shifting its anime Legos around trying to look cool. And yeah, sure it does. Again, Science Sorrow is kind of amazing, and Metric totally rocks, except for the Nurse. Well, they are a rock band. And it's only when it gets into the really meta shit with the entire fucking cast producing the movies, Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, the original version of the story starring the Evil Exes playing the roles of all the main characters, that it actually started to draw me in. Which is weird, because this is the point where most stories would fall completely the fuck apart as they discover the upper limits of sticking your head up your own ass and cover themselves head to foot in pseudo-intellectual pretentious shit that makes you want to beat your head against the wall until it all stops. But no, surprisingly, this is when the story actually starts to get good. And here's what I think the problem is. Matthew Patel trying to be the villain as he takes over the League of Evil Exes, this is where you'd think the story isn't taking itself seriously, but actually it's where it feels like it's taking itself the most seriously, because, well, the weird butt-uppy meta shit is where the story, structurally speaking, starts taking itself more seriously. This is also where the characters, by contrast, are taking themselves less seriously. See, Scott Pilgrim has always looked and played like a Saturday morning cartoon, but felt closer to something like Cowboy Bebop, whereas this plays closer to a grounded story about life, but feels a lot closer to a Saturday morning cartoon. I guess what I'm trying to say is this show only really works when none of the characters know what's going on or what they're even each doing, because that's kind of what Scott Pilgrim is about. It's about being young and confused and fumbling your way through life, hoping you'll eventually stumble onto something worthwhile, and hopefully that thing, somewhere along the way, becomes you. The reason I identify with Scott Pilgrim, why it's my favorite book of all time, is because, well, that's us. We're all fucking idiots just fumbling around in the dark. Ramona deciding that Scott's alive and standing up for herself as the story takes itself seriously doesn't really work, because it's never about that. Because Ramona's just as lost as Scott is. Sure, she puts on this air of cool confidence, but really, she needs him just as much as he needs her. And that's why they have so much chemistry, because while Scott needs something to fight for, Ramona needs to be shown that she's someone worth fighting for. So that's why it starts getting good when it breaks down, because it's when the characters each start losing themselves and their place in the world that it starts to get close to the core of what makes Scott Pilgrim, Scott Pilgrim.
I'm Scott Pilgrim.
Being a big official league with a huge-ass skyscraper, well, on paper, sounds a lot like the world of Scott Pilgrim. It very much isn't, because Scott Pilgrim is about not knowing what you want, not knowing what to do, and just floating through life. Getting fired and becoming an overnight failure, losing your vegan powers after discovering true gayness, reverting back to your pathetic high school self and destroying your girlfriend's house by playing paintball inside a half-pipe you built yourself on the second floor. These things are Scott Pilgrim. So does it suck? Yeah, a lot of it kinda sucks, but here's the thing, and this is the key part. A lot of it doesn't suck. And while I'm not going to spoil the ending, it looks like they did the Netflix thing where they left it open for a sequel. And I'm gonna be honest with this one, guys. No matter how much I feel about this one, most stories don't survive long past maximum own butt penetration of literally inserting themselves into the fucking sequel. So, 2 things. 1, Netflix, and more importantly, Mr. O'Malley, really think long and hard about whether a second one of these would actually be worth making, and if you do, just a reminder, Netflix clearly needs an anime advisor, and I'm right here. And 2, hey, I'm the king of weeaboos. If you like what I had to say, you'd be doing me a huge favor by stepping on that like button. And, as always, thank you so much for your time, friends, and I will see you in the next video.